What's good, guys? So as of recording this video, it's May 30th, so I just want to recap what the best decks were as we head into the next format, and some of these decks are probably going to survive. Lightning Overdrive's about to drop in a week, and I think most people expect a ban list 2 weeks right after, sometime around there. So sometime in June we should have a ban list. So some things might get shaken up, but let's recap what the best decks are. I'm going to go through 1 through 4 because I think there's only 4 meta decks, and I will talk about some like exceptions, some other decks that I think could have seen play, and some other decks that honorable mentions kind of thing. But to start off, Dragon Link. I think Dragon Link is by far the best deck. I don't think anybody can make an argument for other decks. If you guys can make an argument for other decks, let me know in the comments. Especially with like 1, 2, 3, 4, if you guys want to switch around some of this. But like in my opinion, I think this is how the list would go. Dragon Link's crazy. Dragon Link's one of those combo decks that can play through multiple hand traps, which is very interesting. Unlike other combo decks, it doesn't really have one hand trap that it loses to, like such as Drytron, or there's been other combo decks in the past that just get obliterated by Nibiru or things like that. Dragon Link plays through the most amount of hand traps that I've seen from a combo deck, so I think it's really cool. Ever since they also added Chamber DRAGONMAID and had the option of tidying, I enjoyed the idea that their interrupts were diversified. That's always something I look for in a deck. So they have monster negates, a back row, and cards in hand. That's what makes the deck really scary. The pros are there. The deck is just by far the strongest deck, I think. It's a really good combo deck. Plays through multiple things, and when it goes second, it doesn't have a problem breaking any field. Levinair is an insane card. Brotor's an insane card. Everything switches for everything else. LP. I think this deck has so much going for it, and it will definitely see some type of hit, and I don't think it's going anywhere, even if it does take hits. So that's number one. Number two and three, I think, are very controversial. I think you could switch them around, but in my opinion, it has to be the ALEISTER deck. But in specifically, it has to be the ALEISTER deck that actually plays Shaddoll cards and probably Servant as well. I've seen lists that don't play Servant, but that's crazy to me. I think Servant's literally one of the power cards. This is the deck that can match this, like the power level of Dragon Link when it has like the same broken spells. Like things like the Dragon Link deck has like World Legacy, GUARDRAGON, Chaos Space, and Quick Launch. This deck has NADIR, Servant, Prosperity, Meltdown. They a Super Poly, so it comes close. It rivals it, and the fact that it's a good matchup into Dragon Link because of Winda. So many people want Winda ban. I think that one of the biggest reasons why I have this at number 2 is because it's such a good counter into Dragon Link. And I don't think anybody else would argue against that. Winda is very difficult to deal with. I think a lot of Dragon Link players just main deck cards like Dark Ruler, Droplets, things like that just to deal with Winda and nothing else. So yeah, the ALEISTER deck with Shaddoll cards specifically, because I think getting to Winda is the reason why this deck is so strong. If you're just trying to get to Punishment or something, Punishment Mechaba is not going to get the job done, but a Winda with Schism setups and things like that, that's actually very scary. And against the slower decks, this deck actually grinds so much. So second best deck. Third best deck, the Dino deck. The Dino deck, a lot of people I think the Dino deck counters the Dragon deck, but I really don't think so. Recently, I think the Dino deck is going in the right direction because they can go first now with Dagda, and people weren't doing that before. But in the past, people would say Dino can just go second and actually beat Dragon Link most of the time, and I don't think that was true. I think now the Dino actually has Dagda and Scythe. The Dino deck is actually very good. It has a chance to win going second, but I think the chance isn't as high as people like to think. I think going first and actually dropping a Artifact Scythe is way better. So yeah, and Miscellaneous Source is still at 3, which is crazy to me, and that's definitely one of those cards that I think should be seeing a hit. But if it's not Miscellaneous Source, it's gonna be Fossil Dig or OVIRaptor, something like that. But Dino is number 3, and I think you can switch it around if you guys want to switch it around. Yeah, I can definitely see that, but I think actually Wind is just better. I think the ALEISTER deck just has more going for it. But yeah, third best deck, and then the last meta deck, the last deck that I think actually would be in tier 1. So these are all decks that are in tier 1. Has to be the Prankid deck. I had to pick a control deck to put on this list, and I think this is the closest. ALEISTER deck is kind of like a control deck, but this is even closer to the ALEISTER deck as a control deck. This deck can just have 15 one, usually it's 15 one card combos just because you play 3 field spell, 12 kids, some combination of that. Sometimes it's 14, but a link 1 literally just gets you into the combo. I think this deck has some big weaknesses to hand traps. Things like Ash, Skullmeister, Gamma actually just FTK this deck. That's why I didn't want to put it higher up. But I know that one card leading to all those other one card literally leads to 2 Regekis. So I think that's very strong. People underestimate this deck. This deck actually grinds. If the Prank Kid actually resolves, I think this deck's very scary. And the other thing that really sells me on this deck is the fact that you can just play so many non-engine cards, because the engine itself is around 15, 16, 17 cards depending on how many you want to play, but then everything else can be either hand traps or broken trap cards like IDP, or there can be only one, and there can be only one is literally an auto win versus Dragon Link as well. So yeah, this probably is my 4th best deck. I don't know if you guys would put something else. Let me know if you guys would, but I want to go ahead into the honorable mentions before because there is a few other decks that I think are better than the 4 decks I just showed. I think the next one, like, this is an honorable mention, but it just didn't see play, which was weird to me. And like, now that we're going into June, I think this deck will definitely see play. People were playing with the Literalists, but people I think are slowly catching on that the Zoo version is definitely way better until the new support comes after the Literalists. But this is one of my honorable mentions. It just didn't see that much play in the LCSs or the extravaganzas, and that's what I also want to take into account when I'm gonna rate the decks from like 1 to 4, things like that, or put them on tier. But if you put a gun to my head and told me, oh, you have to play a deck and you have to win or else like something bad's gonna happen to you, I would probably pick TRI-BRIGADE over most of these decks, because this deck is very reliable, especially if you play with the Zoo card. And the last deck, the Eldritch deck, this is also one of my favorite decks. It's a control deck, but I think Eldritch is actually very weak. I think it's to me, I personally just like the deck, but I think it's like tier 2. I think it's crazy to put this deck on the same level as any of those other decks that I just went through, like Dragons, ALEISTER, Dinos. It's crazy to actually compare Eldritch to any of this. I think Eldritch is one of those decks you have to play reactive cards, so many reactive cards, and you choose which ones you want to play to counter which deck. Like, if you go to an event and you're expecting a lot of Dragon Link, you're going to play things like Torrential Strike, all that goo, just to deal with like the Dragon Link field. And that's my issue with it. The engine itself is just way too slow. I think every single other engine that I just showed off from all the other top 4 decks are just actually way better. Eldritch is fun to me. The thing that's cool about Eldritch is you could splash it in with a bunch of different decks, so it's always fun to have that. I love decks that can just like shape itself differently every single format, and that's really what Eldritch did. But I would definitely say this is an honorable mention. If there's other decks that I did miss out on, let me know. But I think I covered the big decks, especially for this format, before everything changes after Lightning Overdrive. Guys, leave a comment, like, subscribe if you guys want more videos like this. But these are the top 4 decks and then the honorable mentions. Thank you, and stay tuned for more.